Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harry Lausenis and welcome to my YouTube chess channel, grecochess. We are continuing with the series of games requested by my Facebook friends. In fact, this is the last one I have on my list, unless any of my friends suggest any further games. My Facebook friend for this video is my Greek compatriot Konstantinos Sιέμπος. And the game that he suggested is one that he played against the French Grandmaster Etienne Bacrot. Etienne Bacrot was one of the greatest chess players in the whole world a few years ago. He had reached a top rating of 2749, very near becoming a candidate. He first came into prominence about the year 2000 when Garry Kasparov, the then world champion, was playing against the rest of the world, and the rest of the world had four people to advise the rest of the world how to face Kasparov. One of them was Etienne Bacrot. The other one was the United States Grandmaster Irina Kras. Kasparov ended up winning the game after an enormous difficulty. Even today, Etienne Bacrot is the third top French chess player. The game took place at Kαλλιθέα in Greece for the Greek Chess Championship. The year was 2008. When they played, my Facebook friend Konstantinos Sιέμπος had a rating of 1975 versus 2691 for Etienne Bacrot. So Etienne Bacrot was clearly the favorite, more than 700 points difference. Currently, Konstantinos Sιέμπος has fallen a little bit to 1946, and Bacrot, after reaching 2749 at his peak, is now a little down to 2627. We're going to the chessboard of chess.com. Let me share my screen, and we're going to follow the game. As always, I'm going to enter the moves one by one. I'm copying from the score sheet. We are going to see on the left half of the screen what is the chessboard after that move. And on the right half, we're going to see the computer analysis. The computer is Stockfish 16, and it's going to tell us who has the advantage and how much. This positive number means white has advantage, negative that black has the advantage, and an advantage of 1.0 means the difference of one pawn, meaning if every long-term factor was the same and there was only one pawn material difference. The computer also will analyze the move, not analyze, will evaluate whether it was a brilliant, all the way from brilliant to blunder. And it's going to show which would have been the best move and what are the top first 5 moves of the other player. And we're starting, and my Facebook friends, Costas, I'm going to call him Costas, his nickname, Mr. Sιέμπος, he had the white pieces while Etienne had the black. So Costa starts with the pawn to e4, standard. First move for white, king's pawn opening, you see here. And Etienne replies with pushing the pawn to c5, the so-called Sicilian defense, the most popular response to e4. Next move, a move that is quite well known, although not the most popular for white. Usually white will take out one of the two knights. f3 is the open Sicilian, the most popular, while knight to c3, the closed Sicilian, is the second one. But this is the Alapin variation. You see here Alapin Sicilian defense. When white pushes the pawn to c3, basically preparing to push the pawn to d4 later. Pawn to d6 for Etienne and pawn to d4 for Costas. Knight of 6 for Etienne, threatening the pawn at e4. And you cannot just push it to e5 because then the pawn on d6 is going to take it. And if you put your knight to d2, it's going to block the bishop on c1. So Costas places his bishop on d3. And Etienne develops the other knight to c6. Knight to f3 for Costas, and pawn to e5 for Etienne. We conclude the first 5 moves. All of them are book moves, and this, by the way, is the last book move of the game. And white, Costas has an advantage of 0.96, mostly because white started first. Is this enough to win the game? Let's see. Pawn to d5 for Costas occupies more space, and it's the best move, although we are now out of theory. Knight to e7 for Etienne. Pawn to h3 for Costas wants to stop any g4 ideas, whether the bishop on c8 or the knight from f6 lands in g4. They can exert a lot of pressure. Knight to g6 for Etienne. Bishop to e3 for Costas develops his other bishop as well. And bishop to e7 for Etienne. Both sides develop their pieces one by one and try to occupy and control as much of the center as possible. And the knight from b1 goes to d2 for Costas, continues the development. And pawn to h5 for Etienne. This is what they call a move you really need to think quite well in advance, because this changes the game. You cannot take it back. Pawns cannot move back, and not only the pawns in general cannot move back. This pawn on the one side starts an attack on the h file, but on the other side makes it more difficult for black to castle on king's side. And for Costas, bishop to b5 with a check. King to f8 for Etienne. And of course, from now on, since the king has been moved, black cannot castle. But where will the king go to be safe? That is the other question. You can do what is usually called the castling by hand. Bishop to d3 for Costas. But before we move that, yes, we completed the first 10 moves, and we like every 5 moves to make a summary what is happening. After the first 10 moves, all of them were either book moves or the best or excellent from both players. White Costas has an advantage of 0.95. That is a good one. Not decisive yet, especially when you're 700 rating points down, but really it means that Costas started quite well. Let's see how the game will continue. Bishop to d3 for Costas. Good move, reduces a little bit the advantage. And pawn to h4 for Etienne, who really is serious about an attack along the h file. But for the time being, the h4 pawn cannot go any longer. It's been blocked by the white pawn on h3. Queen to c2 for Costas. His threat, no, there is a pawn on e4. Otherwise, he could take the knight and then take back the pawn. But it's this increases the pressure and the control of the e4 square. Knight to h5 for Etienne. What does Etienne want to do? Start exchanging pawns along the FGH files, because otherwise, of course, the pawn on h4 will get stuck there and will not be useful. This is the first step. And Costas, to avoid any direct attack on his king, and since the attack seems to be on the h file, is going to castle the queen side. The computer doesn't like it. Thinks it's inaccuracy, and for the first time since the start of the game, black Etienne Bacrot has the advantage. Computer would rather have white castle king side. Let's see who is right. Bishop to d7 for Etienne, who inaccuracy since the computer advantage goes back to Costas. Etienne would like, if possible, to use this bishop to go to b5. Of course, now it cannot because of the bishop on d3, or a4, similarly not because of the queen. At least control one of the diagonals near the white king. Pawn to c4 for Costas. Wants to deprive Etienne of any b5 ideas. The problem with this move is that it blocks the bishop on d3. It cannot go to c4, b5, a6, or anything like that. And on the other side, it's also blocked by the e5, by the e4 pawn. So the bishop on d3, to put an anthropomorphic expression, is not feeling well. Pawn to a6. Now, Etienne will start a queenside attack. inaccuracies as a computer would rather have continue the king side with the knight from h5 going to f4. And the 15th move for white, queen to c3, gives a little bit of space to the bishop on d3. Computer thinks it is a mistake, would rather have the rook go from d1 to g1 and have white start an attack along the gh files. And bishop to b5 for Etienne that decides to switch gears and attack along the queen side, and computer thinks the best. So after the first 15 moves, now the advantage goes to black to Etienne with 0.45. But let's see how the game will continue. Costas pushes the pawn to b3, and computer thinks a mistake. This loosens up the area around white's king, because if a bishop could land in a3 to check, and then the pawns could start moving and so on. And it's not that impossible to happen. All that prevents the bishop from e7 going to a3 are the pawns on c5, d6. So now the advantage for Etienne becomes significant, 1.45. And Etienne starts playing on the king side. The knight goes to f4, and so threatens the bishop on d3. Yes, there's going to be an exchange, but if you can deprive white of their bishops, the space near the king can become much looser. And Costas decides to sacrifice the other bishop. From e3 goes to f4, and knight goes to f4. Now let's see, what does the computer think? Excellent and best. The advantage of Etienne increases a little bit, 164. And Costas wants to keep his bishop, so he sends to the square f1. It is a good square to control the opposite knight, exactly 3 squares difference, 2 squares between them, because from f1 the bishop controls the squares e2, d3, g2, and indirectly h3, 4 out of the 8 squares where the black knight can go. It also cannot go to e6 because of the pawn on d5. It cannot go to d5 because of the pawn c4, e4. So if attacked, the Etienne's knight can only go to g6 or h5. King to g8 for Etienne. Computer thinks a mistake. Most likely Etienne wanted to, what they call it, castle by hand. But the result is that his advantage is cut to half. From 2.14 goes to 1.17. Knight to e1 for Costas, that most likely doesn't want to keep it there, but wants to redirect it elsewhere, most likely to d3. Bishop to f6 for Etienne, that is pointing towards the white king on c3, and it's only the black pawn at e5 that keeps the queen safe for now. Knight to d3, exactly as we predicted, wants to exchange the knights. Etienne wants to keep as few pieces as possible near white's king. But Etienne, instead of exchanging the knights or moving his knight backwards, the knight doesn't have too many squares to go, decides danger level, as they say, with the Zwick and Zug, meaning an intermediate move, attack white's king, send the pawn to b4, which means that white cannot just take the knight on f4, because then they're going to lose a queen. And at this point, we completed the first 20 moves, and the advantage goes to Etienne, becomes larger and larger. It's already 2.22 after the first 20 moves. And let's see if Costas will be able to come back. Queen to c2, well, of course, saves the queen to begin with. Pawn to a5, and now Etienne continues an attack along the a and b files. Now Costas will exchange the knights, And by doing so, has doubled Etienne's f pawns. Etienne has 2 pawns on f4 and f7. And usually, everything else being equal, you don't want doubled pawns. Although there are times when it's an advantage, especially if they control critical squares. Knight to f3 for Costas. Good move, but the advantage of Etienne becomes 3.60. And pawn to a4 for Etienne that continues his attack on the AB file, wants to get more and more space. Bishop to e3, to d3 for Costas. And we exchange on b3. You don't like this thing. Why? Because the black rook can easily go to square e1 with a check. Then bishop can go to c3. Once the king goes to d2, bishop go to c3, check. The queen cannot take it, otherwise you lose your queen. And then the king can only go to e2 and e1. Your chances become smaller and smaller. The squares where the king can go become fewer and fewer. But Etienne believes, and rightly so, that he's not completely ready because the two rooks on d1 and h1, if necessary, can grab the rook on a1. They can be exchanged. That is why, first of all, what Etienne is doing is he's placing his bishop on c3. A crucial square controls the b2 and d2 squares. You understand that if black could play second move in a row, rook goes to a1, and white would have to place the queen on b1 to stop the mate. And then Etienne would win a queen for a rook. Let's see how he's going to react. Desperate times require desperate measures, as I say, and knight goes to d2. So if rook goes to a1 now, then the knight is going to go to b1, block the check, and then black doesn't need to, actually, black cannot gain a queen for a rook. And what is Etienne going to do? Pawn to f3. And prepares perhaps to place the queen on g5 and pin the knight on d2. In addition, of course, to the pawn on f3, going to g2 and threatening promotion. We completed 26 moves, and Etienne has an advantage of 5.25. And at this point, Costas resigned. Congratulations to Etienne Bacrot for his win, and Costas, thank you for sharing this game, and I really appreciate this is my only Facebook friend that sent me a game that he lost. Most people would rather forget these games, but we learn from our losses, and Costas, thanks, and I really appreciate the fact that you gave me a game that you didn't do that well, and hopefully it was a big lesson. And let's see what does the computer have to say about it. Let's go to the review. You see, 90.5 accuracy for Etienne Bacrot. It's a large number. Well, not in the 95s that we saw other players, but still significant. 177.6 for Costas. And they played as if their ratings were 1900 for Costas. This is a little bit less than his 1975. And Etienne 2450, quite less than his 2691, but maybe he thought that's all he needed. And the various categories, no brilliant or great moves. Best, 9 for Etienne, 2 for Costas. Excellent for each of them. Good, 5 for Costas, 2 for Etienne. 5 book moves each of them, and on things to consider for improvement. Inaccuracy, 7 for Costas, 6 for Etienne, and mistakes, 3 for Costas. This concludes the review of this game, and let's go to the tournaments. First of all, the grecochess tournament. Nothing is changing. We have Barak 7 from Israel qualified from Group 2. My Skin from Italy qualified from Group 4. Group 1, Maxim Govorokra from Ukraine is waiting to see if Hunting Achievements is going to play. Hunting Achievements has last logged in October 20th and still has 14 days remaining, and plus the 3 days, of course, is the time per move. So 17 days from today. Today is the 25th. So plus 17 days is going to make it December 12th. So by December 12th, we're going to know what's going to happen in Group 1. Group 2, actually, Group 2 we mentioned. Group 3, it is between me from the Harry from Greece and the Lion from Hungary. We have both won against everybody else, although we've won with timeouts, as you see, not anything spectacular. So it's two games between us that decide who will advance. If we have 1 point each, we both advance. Otherwise, the player with the most points is going to advance. Let's go to the other tournament, the Underwater Moonlight. Underwater Moonlight, the 9 Moons tournament with 81 players, 9 groups of 9. The first 3 qualify for the next round, the semi-final. Group 1, Lotus Tank Chess from Japan, 13.5 points. Group 2, Spider 9 from Egypt, 11 points. Group 3, the organizer of the tournament, my Italian subscriber Zanilor with 10 points. Group 4, Iraq Lion from Iraq, 8 points. Group 5, Chinafu from Greenland, 12. Group 6, Mathis B 2008 from France has 12. Group 7, Junard F68 from Uzbekistan has 14 and a half. Has completed with 14 and a half points out of a maximum of 16. Most likely that should be enough to advance. Let's see anyone can catch him. Möbius from, is this Nigeria? Yes, has only one loss perhaps. And Tragis from Brazil might tie. So Janat F66 from Uzbekistan has clearly advanced, has more points than anybody else. Group 8. It's my group. And I'm tying with Khaled Katab from Egypt. But first of all, Khaled Katab has more tie-breaking points, 30 versus 16 for me. And second, he has 7 wins and 1 loss, while I have 7 wins and 8 losses. So I'm going to end up with between 7 and 8 points. Will that be enough to advance? Most likely not, but let's see. And Group 9 from Australia, Steamed Rock has 8 points and 32 tie-breaking points, while Lua 000 from Spain has also 8 points and 28 tie-breaking points. Let's see how are we doing. How is the tournament advancing? We have completed 449 games, as you see, from first round. 199 remain, meaning about 70% of the first round has been completed. That's it for now. We will continue with my games at the Connecticut State Championship. I played 4 games there, and then I have 3 more games from the Cheshanity tournament. Unless any of my other Facebook friends sends me any other game. But thanks everybody for watching, for the viewers. Thanks to the subscribers. We have more and more subscribers every day. To the likes and to the encouraging comments. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Harry Lauseniziris. This is my YouTube GrecoChess channel. Goodbye.